The mysterious Earth ambassador. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Galactic Council Hall, a massive structure floating in the heart of the galaxy, was a place where the most powerful beings in the universe gathered to discuss matters of war, peace, and trade. Aliens from every corner of the cosmos had met here for centuries, and no one had ever thought to question the status quo. Earth, however, was different. The young planet, barely a speck in the vastness of space, had been granted a seat at the table. And today, its representative, the Earth ambassador, was about to make his first appearance. The room was filled with whispers and uncertain glances. Alien leaders, most of them towering, their forms exuding power and advanced technology, eyed each other with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. The Earth ambassador was expected to be nothing more than a ceremonial figure, someone who would speak of peace and cooperation, but offer little else. After all, Earth had no military power, no great technological advancements, only its reputation for kindness and diplomacy. The ambassador stepped into the room. He was a simple man with an unassuming presence. His clothes were plain, almost humble, and his expression was calm. The leaders in the room looked at him with raised brows. They were expecting a typical speech about unity and harmony, a message they had heard 1,000 times before from weaker species who came seeking protection or trade. The ambassador's voice echoed through the hall, soft but steady. "I am here to speak on behalf of Earth," he said, his words simple yet filled with an undeniable weight. For a moment, the room went silent, all eyes fixed on him. "You are all aware," he continued, "that Earth has no army, no weapons of war, and no desire to conquer other worlds. But there is something we have that none of you possess: the truth." The statement was so unexpected that a few of the alien leaders exchanged puzzled glances. They had not prepared for this. The ambassador wasn't speaking like they had assumed. He wasn't pandering. He wasn't offering empty words. Instead, he was implying something far more significant. The truth. One of the council members, a massive reptilian creature, scoffed. "What truth could your species possibly know? You are but children in the eyes of the galaxy." The ambassador didn't flinch. "The truth about the weapon that is hidden in this galaxy," he said calmly. "The weapon that has the power to destroy everything, including all of you." The room froze. The alien leaders, who had lived centuries in peace and prosperity, now looked at each other with uncertainty. A weapon that could destroy them. The thought was absurd. Who could possibly have such power? The ambassador continued, "This weapon is not of your making. It predates your species, and it is not something you understand. But I know where it is, and I know how to stop it." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. A few of them laughed nervously, dismissing the ambassador's words as the ramblings of an inexperienced diplomat. But there was something in the way he spoke, something in his eyes, that made them pause. The confidence in his voice was unlike anything they had ever expected from Earth. "Your planet is nothing more than a small rock floating in space," another council member, a cold, calculating figure with glowing eyes, said dismissively. "You have no power, no weapons, no resources. What could you possibly offer us?" The ambassador's eyes locked onto the council member, and for a moment, the room seemed to grow colder. "You may think Earth is weak," he said, his voice unwavering. "But you have made a grave mistake in underestimating us. We may not have weapons of mass destruction, but we have something far more dangerous: our resolve. And we know things that you have overlooked." The council member scoffed, but the unease in the room was palpable. The alien leaders, who had expected an easy meeting, were now beginning to question whether they had made the wrong assumption about Earth. The ambassador paused, allowing the silence to settle over the room. "I do not expect you to believe me," he said, "but I am asking you to listen, because the fate of the galaxy depends on it." A murmur rippled through the council members, their voices filled with suspicion and doubt. The room was growing tense. The ambassador, despite his calm demeanor, had just challenged everything they thought they knew. The galaxy's most powerful species had spent millennia dominating the cosmos, and now this one human was asking them to reconsider their place in the universe. "We may be young," the ambassador added, "but we are not naive. Earth has been watching, learning, and waiting. And now we are ready to make our move." The council was silent. They had no idea what Earth's ambassador meant, but the quiet confidence in his voice made them uneasy. There was something about him, something about the human species, that was more than they had bargained for. The ambassador wasn't just speaking for Earth anymore. He was speaking for something far larger, a force that could shake the foundations of the galaxy. As the meeting continued, the council members couldn't help but wonder, was Earth really as harmless as they had thought? And if not, what was this ambassador hiding? What truth was he so sure of? And what power did Earth possess that could shatter their view of the galaxy? The questions lingered in the air, unanswered, and the tension in the room grew thicker by the second. Something had shifted. The galaxy had been comfortable in its belief that Earth was weak, but now they were beginning to see that they might have been wrong. And with that, the ambassador's message had been planted. The truth was out there, and it would take more than just power to face it. The galaxy's reality was about to change, and Earth was at the center of it all. The power of Earth's ambassador. The council room remained still after the ambassador's cryptic words. A few of the members exchanged glances, but no one spoke immediately. The air was thick with tension, and the silence felt like a heavy weight pressing down on everyone present. In the far corner of the hall, a holographic display shimmered to life, flashing images of Earth's simple technology, towering cities, vast oceans, and sprawling forests. The ambassador had requested the display to be activated, showing the council a brief overview of Earth's history, culture, and the technological advancements they had achieved. It was a modest presentation, nothing extravagant, but the images were enough to show that Earth had come far in its brief existence in the universe. But there was no mention of weapons, no images of spacecraft or military power, nothing that suggested Earth had any interest in conquest or domination. To the alien council, this was both reassuring and perplexing. Earth was still a small, relatively new planet compared to the ancient civilizations surrounding them. "I see no armies, no space fleets," the cold alien leader with glowing eyes said with a slight sneer. "What exactly are you implying, Ambassador? That you can threaten us with your resolve?" The ambassador didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply presenting facts. You've seen Earth's history. You've seen our technology. It's not advanced in terms of weaponry, but it's advanced in other ways, ways you don't understand yet." A murmur rippled through the council as some of the more curious members leaned forward, intrigued by the ambassador's certainty. They had never considered that the human race might possess something they hadn't anticipated. Perhaps Earth wasn't the weak species they had all assumed. "Your species," the ambassador continued, "has grown accustomed to fighting and conquering. You've seen technology as the only form of power. But Earth has something different. We have the ability to connect with others, to build relationships, to create understanding." He paused, looking around the room. "And that in itself is a power that none of you can underestimate." At first, the council was skeptical, but as the ambassador spoke, something began to shift. Some of the older, wiser council members who had lived through countless wars and political struggles started to see the kernel of truth in his words. They had all relied on strength, strength in numbers, strength in technology, strength in weapons. But what if Earth's power didn't lie in any of those things? What if their strength was in something more intangible, something that couldn't be quantified with weapons or military might? The idea was difficult to grasp for some, but for others, it seemed to make sense. The ambassador turned toward the center of the room, where a large holographic map of the galaxy was displayed. "There's a larger danger out there, one that you've all overlooked," he said, his voice now more intense. "A force that has the potential to wipe out entire star systems in an instant. It's not a weapon that can be held or fired. It's an ancient force, something far older than your civilizations. The room fell silent again. Some of the more skeptical members were still dismissive, but the majority were now intrigued. The ambassador wasn't speaking of a physical weapon. He wasn't talking about a bomb, a missile, or a fleet of ships. He was talking about something far more dangerous, a force that could disrupt the very fabric of reality. This force, the ambassador continued, has been dormant for millennia, hidden in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But it's beginning to stir. And if it's allowed to grow unchecked, it could lead to the destruction of everything you've worked for. This galaxy, your civilizations, everything. One of the council members, a tall, armored being with multiple limbs, spoke up. "What is it you want from us, human? You speak of this threat, but we have not seen any evidence of it. How can we trust you?" The ambassador's expression softened. "I don't ask for your trust. I only ask for your attention. I know where this force is coming from, and I know how to stop it. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. Together, we have a chance to prevent disaster." The council was quiet for a long moment. The idea of uniting with Earth, something so small and insignificant in their eyes, was a difficult one to accept. They had never worked with Earth before, and their instinct was to dismiss the humans as irrelevant. But the ambassador's conviction was undeniable. There was something about him, something that made the council leaders pause and reconsider. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the reptilian council member who had first challenged the ambassador spoke again. "I will admit," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, "that I am intrigued. You've managed to plant a seed of doubt in my mind, but that is not enough. We need proof. We need evidence." The ambassador nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I understand, and I will provide it." The holographic map flickered again, and a new display appeared, a vast, swirling nebula, located in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The ambassador pointed to it. "This," he said, "is where the threat is coming from, and the key to stopping it lies within this region." The council members stared at the nebula, their minds racing. They had heard of it before, a dark and mysterious part of space that no one had dared to explore. Some believed it was a place of danger, while others dismissed it as nothing more than an anomaly. But the ambassador wasn't finished. "I know what lies within that nebula, and I know how we can stop it, but we must act quickly, before it's too late." The room was filled with a mix of awe and suspicion. The ambassador's words had changed the tone of the meeting entirely. The council members, once so certain of their power, were now faced with the possibility of an unknown threat. And the human species, once thought to be nothing more than a curious bystander in galactic affairs, had just made itself a key player in the future of the galaxy. The ambassador's message had been delivered, and now the galaxy would have to decide whether to trust him or risk the consequences of ignoring his warning. The unseen enemy. As the last words of the ambassador hung in the air, the council members exchanged uneasy glances. The once confident leaders, known for their wisdom and power, were now caught in a web of uncertainty. They had spent millennia believing in their superiority, trusting in their weapons, their alliances, and their ancient civilizations. But now, for the first time, they were confronted with something far beyond their understanding. The ambassador had painted a picture of the galaxy in peril, but they still hadn't seen proof. It wasn't enough to take his word for it. Trust had to be earned, and the council wasn't about to take a leap into the unknown based on the claims of a seemingly insignificant species like humanity. The council hall was buzzing with murmurs. Some of the older leaders, whose experience in galactic politics had granted them a deeper sense of caution, were already raising objections. "I still don't see why we should risk everything on the word of this human," one of the counselors said, his voice tinged with skepticism. "They are a young species with no real military might. Why should we believe they know anything about an ancient threat?" The ambassador, calm and composed, stepped forward once more. I understand your doubts, and I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. What I am offering is a chance to look deeper, to see the reality behind the stories. This isn't just about Earth. This is about all of us. He gestured toward the map, zooming in on the nebula he had shown earlier. The dark, swirling mass seemed to pulse ominously, as though alive with some kind of unknown energy. The ambassador's voice grew quieter, more urgent. You've heard the legends, the old stories about forces that predate your civilizations. Forces that, when disturbed, can alter the fabric of the universe itself. This nebula, this anomaly, it's more than just a place of cosmic dust. It is the cradle of that forgotten power. The same power that could bring about the end of everything. The council members fell silent once again. The legend of such forces had been passed down through the ages, but no one had ever truly believed in them. They were just that, stories, myths, passed down through time, with no real basis in reality. But the ambassador's words had awakened something deep within them. What if those stories were more than myths? What if they were warnings? The reptilian leader, who had earlier been the most skeptical, spoke once more, his voice now laced with caution. You claim to know how to stop it, but you have yet to explain how. What makes you so certain, Ambassador? The ambassador nodded, acknowledging the concern. Because I've seen it, he replied. I've seen the effects of this power firsthand. I've watched entire civilizations crumble under its influence. I've seen the unraveling of time and space, as though the laws of reality themselves were being rewritten. The room fell into an uneasy quiet as the council members processed his words. The ambassador's confidence was both alarming and strangely reassuring. There was no denying the weight of what he was saying. He wasn't speaking of some distant possibility. He was speaking of something imminent, something that had already begun to stir in the far reaches of the galaxy. The human ambassador looked around at the faces of the council members, each one carefully considering his words. He had to act quickly, for time was running out. Every second we waste, he said, his voice firm, is another second closer to the danger becoming a reality. The galaxy is at the edge of a precipice, and I am offering you the chance to step back. But we must act now. One of the council members, a sleek, insectoid being with multiple eyes, raised a hand, signaling the others to quiet. The insectoid spoke slowly, as if weighing each word carefully. Your claims are bold, human, it said, but your lack of evidence leaves us with no choice but to remain cautious. We will send a scout ship to investigate this nebula. If your warning proves true, we will consider your request further. The ambassador's gaze hardened, but he nodded in agreement. I understand. But I must warn you, this is no ordinary mission. This is not an exploration. This is not a simple reconnaissance. If you send a scout, you will encounter something far more dangerous than any of you realize. The insectoid leader tilted its head, confused. Then what would you have us do? You cannot expect us to act on blind faith alone. The ambassador's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in closer. I'm asking you to trust me long enough to witness the truth for yourselves. If you don't, you will soon see the consequences of ignoring this threat. And by then, it will be too late. There was a long pause before the reptilian leader spoke again, his tone soft yet serious. Very well. We will investigate. But make no mistake, human, if your story proves false, there will be consequences. The ambassador did not flinch. I'm not concerned with consequences. I'm concerned with saving your civilizations, if you'll allow me the chance. With that, the council meeting drew to a close. The members departed with heavy hearts, each of them considering the implications of what they had just learned. The human ambassador had planted a seed of doubt, and for the first time, they found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about the universe. The ambassador, standing alone in the empty chamber, looked at the map once more. The nebula continued to pulse, an ominous reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond the known reaches of the galaxy. It was a race against time, and the ambassador knew that the fate of countless worlds rested on his shoulders. He had done all he could for now. The next steps were in the hands of the galaxy. The first contact. The galaxy buzzed with an uneasy energy. In the days following the council meeting, ships were dispatched to investigate the nebula, but the tension that had gripped the meeting remained. The ambassador's warnings had made waves, and though some dismissed it as another human exaggeration, others had taken the matter to heart. The galaxy's most advanced scout ships were deployed, each one taking a different path to approach the nebula. There was no clear plan to what was waiting in the darkness, no set course to chart beyond the event horizon of the mysterious anomaly. Yet each ship crew knew what was at stake. They had been tasked with the same mission: confirm the human ambassador's warning or dismiss it. The results could either change the course of galactic history or prove the ambassador to be a well-meaning but misguided figure. For Commander Lysia, the mission was personal. A seasoned officer of the esteemed Zorian fleet, she had fought in countless battles, witnessed the rise and fall of planets, and had seen how quickly an empire could crumble. Her crew, a mix of experienced Zorian warriors and exploratory scientists, was more than capable, but Lysia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were diving headfirst into something much bigger than they had been told. As their ship, the Nova's Edge, sailed closer to the nebula, its sensors began to glitch. The crew had been prepared for occasional malfunctions. Space was unpredictable. But these disturbances were different. The glitches became more frequent, and the images of the nebula became harder to process. The deep red swirls of the nebula seemed to move on their own, pulling in nearby objects and reflecting strange lights that weren't supposed to be there. Lysia stood at the command bridge, watching with a sense of foreboding as the readings grew more bizarre by the second. "Commander," said one of the science officers, her voice trembling, "we're losing control of our navigation systems. The nebula, it's affecting our course. We can't maintain the vector." Lysia's sharp gaze never left the monitor. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the tendrils of light stretch outward from the nebula like a grasping hand. The ship's systems continued to glitch and flicker, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched and compressed. The crew was no longer in control. "This is impossible," Lysia muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. She had heard stories of strange cosmic phenomena, but she had never encountered anything like this. The readings, the anomalies, they were like nothing her people had ever seen. Before she could react, an urgent alert rang through the bridge, cutting through her thoughts. "Commander, we have incoming," shouted the helmsman. Lysia's heart raced as she turned to face the screen. Outside the ship, a new object had emerged from the nebula's core. It was massive, incomprehensibly so. Its shape defied conventional understanding. Its surface appeared to shimmer and shift, like liquid metal. The craft seemed to pulse with dark energy, growing brighter and more menacing by the second. Lysia didn't flinch. "I've seen it with my own eyes. The ship that attacked us, it was unlike anything I've encountered before, and we're not the only ones who felt its presence. The galaxy's sensor grids are already picking up anomalous readings. Something is coming, and if we don't act now, it will destroy us all." The room was filled with a mixture of disbelief and fear. The counselors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between Lysia and the projections. It was clear they were struggling to come to terms with the reality she was presenting. A voice from across the room broke the tension. "Lysia is right," said Ambassador Corin, a wise elder of the Elythrians, a peaceful but highly intelligent race. "We cannot ignore this any longer. The balance of the galaxy is threatened, and the ambassador from Earth may hold the key to understanding what we face." Lysia turned to Corin, her eyes narrowing. "You believe the human ambassador's warnings now, after all this time of dismissing him?" Corin met her gaze with a calm, knowing look. "The signs are undeniable. The human ambassador speaks of forces beyond the galaxy's understanding, forces that have been quietly watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I think you've just glimpsed that moment." The Zorian counselor, who had spoken out earlier, sneered. We will not bow to superstition. The galaxy is built on logic and science. There's no place for these outlandish claims. Ambassador Luria, a serene but sharp-eyed leader from the peaceful Morithian species, raised her hand, silencing the room. I think we are past the point of logic and reason, she said, her voice measured but firm. Something has happened that cannot be ignored. We've had peace for centuries, yes, but peace is a fragile thing. And now, the very foundation of that peace is being tested. The room grew quiet as Luria's words sank in. The council members knew it was true. Peace had reigned for centuries, but peace had also bred complacency. They had become comfortable with their power, with their dominance, and the thought of something so beyond their comprehension threatened their very existence. But deep down, they also knew that they had no choice but to face it. Lysia spoke again, her voice filled with urgency. We need to prepare. We need to form an alliance like we've never done before. The galaxy must stand united against this threat, but we can't do it alone. We need the humans. At the mention of humanity, the room fell into an even deeper silence. The humans, a relatively young species in the eyes of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, were often seen as unpredictable and dangerous. Their ability to adapt and fight was undeniable, but they had no history of galactic unity. They were often dismissed, and their presence at the council was treated as more of an afterthought than a genuine partnership. But now, the entire galaxy was looking at Earth in a new light. The human ambassador had been right all along. It was the strange, seemingly insignificant humans who had recognized the impending threat before anyone else. What do you suggest, Commander? Ambassador Corin asked, his tone thoughtful. Lysia's eyes burned with determination. We need to send a united force to confront whatever is waiting for us out there. We cannot underestimate it, and we cannot afford to wait any longer. We must prepare for war. The room was silent for a long moment, each council member weighing their options. They knew this was no longer a matter of diplomacy or politics. It was a matter of survival. Finally, the Jorian counselor spoke again, his voice cold but resigned. Very well. We will begin preparations. But know this, if this threat is real, then we are all in this together. No one can stand alone. Lysia nodded grimly. Then let's make sure we're ready. As the council adjourned, Lysia turned to the human ambassador, her mind racing with the implications of what had just been set in motion. The galaxy was about to change. The war they were about to face was unlike anything they had ever seen. And Earth was about to take its place. The battle for the galaxy. The final hour had come. The vast fleet of galactic allies, with the humans at its core, was poised at the edge of the nebula. Ships of every design, from sleek Elythrian cruisers to heavily armored Jorian warships, formed a unified line, ready to engage whatever lay beyond the nebula's glowing veil. The air was thick with anticipation, and Lysia couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to enter the unknown. The human ambassador, now fully integrated into the strategy command, stood beside her in the flagship's bridge, his eyes scanning the battlefield ahead. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the nervous energy surrounding them, yet it was this very composure that gave Lysia a sense of trust. She had seen it before in the heat of battle, that rare and dangerous calm in a soldier who knew they could survive anything. Are the human ships ready? Lysia asked, her voice steady, but carrying a hint of urgency. The ambassador nodded, his voice even. Every single one. We've trained for this, Commander. The fleet is ready to move as one. Lysia didn't doubt his words, but as she looked out at the dark expanse ahead, she realized that readiness alone wouldn't guarantee their survival. There was something about the nebula that unsettled her. The energy readings had been sporadic and chaotic, as if the very fabric of space-time was being twisted and manipulated. No one truly understood what lay within it. Commander, a voice from the communication station interrupted her thoughts. Incoming message from the human fleet. They're ready to jump. Lysia didn't hesitate. Tell them to proceed. With a deep breath, She watched as the first ships of the human fleet activated their jump drives. One by one, they vanished into the swirling maelstrom of the nebula. The rest of the fleet followed, each ship disappearing into the unknown. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a ripple of energy surged across the flagship's hull as the fleet entered the nebula's turbulent space. The stars outside shifted and flickered, their light distorted by the powerful gravitational fields within. It was like nothing Lygia had ever seen before. This wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was something far more dangerous and far more alive. The nebula was alive. Suddenly, a massive shockwave rocked the fleet. Lygia gripped the edge of her console as the ship groaned under the strain of the energy blast. The human ambassador's voice cut through the chaos, firm and commanding. "Steady, everyone. Focus on the mission. We've trained for this." His words helped steady her nerves, and Lygia quickly focused on the battle at hand. The fleet had entered the nebula, and the unknown force had already made its presence felt. As far as the eye could see, swirling energy patterns danced in the nebula's depths, threatening to tear the fleet apart. But then, something else emerged. It wasn't just energy. Shapes, massive and dark, began to form in the distance. Ghostly figures, shifting in and out of existence. The first ships of the enemy fleet had arrived. Lygia's heart raced as she watched the silhouettes of the alien ships coalesce from the swirling energy. They were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered, organic, pulsing with raw power, as if they were made from the very essence of the nebula itself. "Open fire," Lygia ordered, her voice sharp. "Defensive positions." The fleet reacted immediately, energy blasts lighting up the void as the ships of the Galactic Alliance opened fire. The strange enemy ships responded with ferocity, their weapons striking like lightning, tearing through the shields of the first few warships. Explosions rocked the battlefield as debris floated in the vastness of space. But despite the destruction, the human ships held strong. They moved with purpose, their weapons fire unrelenting as they targeted the enemy vessels with pinpoint accuracy. Lygia could hear the ambassador's calm orders flowing through the communication channels as the human fleet coordinated flawlessly with the rest of the galactic forces. This wasn't a random act of bravery. This was precision. This was strategy. And it was working. The alien ships began to falter, their attacks becoming less organized as the human fleet pushed back. The strange energy patterns in the nebula started to dissipate, their form weakening as the fleet pressed forward. "This is it," the ambassador said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We can win this. Just stay focused." Lygia's heart pounded as she watched the enemy forces crumble under the combined might of the Alliance. The human ships were everywhere, moving with a fluidity and determination that seemed almost unnatural. They didn't just fight. They adapted, learning from each encounter and improving their tactics with each passing second. As the last of the enemy ships disintegrated in a burst of light, Lygia stood frozen, her breath shallow. The nebula was silent once more. "We did it," she whispered in awe. "We actually did it." The human ambassador stood by her side, his gaze fixed on the wreckage of the alien fleet. "No, Commander. We did it together." The battle was over. The galaxy had survived. And for the first time in history, the galaxy would never forget the humans, their courage, their resilience, and the one thing no one had ever expected: their ability to turn the tide of battle and change the course of history forever. Lygia looked out at the stars, a quiet smile forming on her lips. The galaxy would never be the same again. And she couldn't help but wonder, what would be next for the humans? What other wonders or dangers would they bring to the table? But whatever it was, she knew the galaxy would be ready. And together, they would face it.